If I close my eyes, I can still feel the rhythm of our footsteps on the pavement. Every morning, just before sunrise, we'd lace up our shoes and step out into the cool silence of our neighborhood, the world still cloaked in half-sleep. It had started as a way to reconnect, me and Olivia, partners in stride, reclaiming those quiet hours before the chaos of kids, work, and life pulled us in different directions. We ran together, talked about everything and nothing, and I thought, naively, maybe, that we were rebuilding something. We'd been married 8 years at that point. Our twins had just turned 5, and while parenthood was fulfilling in its own way, it had smoothed the sharpness from our relationship, replaced fire with function. I was a financial analyst, predictable in every sense. Olivia taught yoga part-time and stayed home the rest, juggling preschool pickups, meal planning, and a side hustle selling wellness supplements online. I remember the morning she suggested we bring in a trainer. Just for a few weeks, she'd said, tying her hair back with a scrunchie that had once belonged to her teenage years. You said your knees were bothering you again, right? Maybe some gait training would help. It made sense. I was pushing 40 and carried the wear of desk years in my lower back and knees. So we hired Grant. He was every cliché you'd expect. Lean, tanned, the type of man whose body looked like it had been carved by coastal winds. Always in running shorts, his voice a gravelly calm that somehow managed to soothe and invigorate at once. He knew how to talk just enough without saying much. I noticed the way Olivia stood straighter around him, the way her laugh softened, less restrained than when we were alone. But I didn't think anything of it at first. Who wouldn't be charmed by someone like Grant? The three of us would run together 3 times a week. He'd correct our posture, adjust our breathing rhythms, call out distances. He even helped me rework my form to alleviate some of the strain on my joints. He was good. Too good, maybe. The first time I felt something truly wrong was a Tuesday. It was the middle of March, the air still brisk from winter's retreat. We were halfway through our run when Olivia feigned a calf cramp. Grant slowed beside her, crouching down, pressing into her leg with slow, circular motions. I jogged in place a few feet away, unsure if I should step in or give them space. The exchange was quiet, too quiet. Their eye contact lingered a little too long. When I caught Olivia's gaze, she looked startled, like I wasn't supposed to be watching. That night, I dreamt of running alone. Endless pavement, no start, no end. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding with a fear I couldn't name. It got harder to ignore the signs after that. She started running on mornings I couldn't make it, claiming she needed the extra miles, the time to herself. Once, I came home from an early meeting and saw her slipping out of the shower. She looked surprised to see me, her body still damp, her hair hastily pinned. The bathroom smelled faintly of eucalyptus and sweat, but not the kind that clings from a solo workout. It smelled lived in. Shared. I started waking up earlier, trying to catch them leaving. Sometimes I'd watch from the window as she jogged to meet him at the end of our cul-de-sac. They wouldn't start running right away. They'd stretch, talk, laugh. Once, I saw his hand graze the small of her back as they leaned into a synchronized quad stretch. She didn't flinch. It was subtle, almost surgical, the way their intimacy grew. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, insecure. Olivia still smiled at me, still cooked dinner, still asked about my day. But her touch was different, absent, like her hands were no longer mine to claim. When we made love, it felt rehearsed, like she was reciting lines from a script she no longer believed in. I tried confronting her once, over a glass of wine after the kids went to bed. You and Grant seem close, I said, watching her closely. She looked up, her expression unreadable. We run together. You used to run with me, remember? There was an edge to her voice, a challenge embedded beneath the words. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Just be careful, I added. Her lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. You sound jealous. Maybe I was. Maybe I had reason to be. Weeks passed. Her early morning runs grew more frequent. She started showering before coming home, said she preferred the gym locker room. The scent of sandalwood clung to her skin sometimes, foreign and distinct from the lavender soaps we kept in our bathroom. I started keeping tabs, times, distances, locations. But everything seemed normal on the surface. Until one morning, I followed them. I told her I had a conference call and couldn't run. kissed her on the cheek, and watched her jog down the driveway. Then I grabbed my keys and drove a few blocks down, parking where they wouldn't see me. They took a different route that day, through the park trail, away from the main streets. I followed from a distance, heart in my throat. At the edge of the wooded trail, they stopped. She leaned into him, laughing about something, and then he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, not a misunderstanding, a kiss that had weight. History. Her hand reached for the back of his neck, pulling him in deeper. I couldn't hear anything, but I didn't need to. My knees buckled. I didn't confront them. I turned and walked back to my car, every step heavier than the last. My breath caught in my chest, a tightness that refused to ease. That evening, she came home smiling, humming to herself. She kissed the kids goodnight, laughed at something on her phone, and slid into bed beside me like nothing had changed. But everything had. That was a week ago. Since then, I haven't said a word. I haven't touched her. I go through the motions, work, dinner, bedtime stories, but inside, something is unraveling. This morning, she left early again. I watched her from the window, her silhouette fading into the horizon as Grant emerged from the shadows, already waiting. I don't know how long I stood there, staring, but I knew what I had to do next. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles in after the truth becomes undeniable. Not the panicked silence of discovery, but the dull, enduring hush that follows. The kind of silence that wraps around your ribs and tightens with every breath, reminding you that something sacred has been broken. That's where I lived in the days that followed. In that quiet. Each morning, Olivia continued her ritual, slipping out just before dawn, her running shoes echoing softly on the tile floor as she tiptoed out the door. She always left gently, as if trying not to wake me, though surely by now she must have known I was already awake. I stopped following her. I didn't need more proof. The image of their embrace, half hidden beneath the tangled limbs of early morning trees, was burned into my memory with such vividness that nothing else could sharpen it. It wasn't the kiss that hurt the most, it was the ease of it. As if it wasn't a betrayal, but routine. Familiar. I started keeping a journal. Not because I'm the journaling type. I'm not. But because I needed somewhere to put the screaming inside my head. The questions. The rage. The helplessness. Every page began the same. Olivia left again at 5:43 a.m. I pretended to sleep. I don't think she kissed me goodbye. I filled pages. The entries varied. Some days were bitter, others numb. One, written hastily in the margins of a receipts envelope, simply said, "I wish I didn't love her." Because I did. Even then. That was the worst part. I still loved her. Our children, Lily and Theo, remained unaware. At 5 years old, the world is still simple. Morning cuddles, cartoons, pancakes. I wrapped myself in those little rituals like armor, desperate to protect them from the unraveling threads between their parents. I smiled harder, laughed louder, and made a point of being present. If Olivia noticed the sudden surge of attentiveness, she didn't say anything. Maybe she was grateful for the cover I was providing. One Thursday evening, I found her phone face down on the kitchen counter. She was in the backyard, watering the garden. Something about the sight of her outside, barefoot, bathed in golden twilight, made the bile rise in my throat. That image had once meant peace. Now it was a lie. I picked up her phone. No passcode. She trusted me. I hesitated for a long time, fingers hovering over the screen. Then, without fully allowing myself to think, I opened her messages. His name was saved as G. A simple letter, almost sterile. Inside were fragments of a world I was never meant to see. Shared routes, breathless selfies, flirty exchanges about pace and mileage that gradually gave way to something rawer. More intimate. Same trail tomorrow. Your hips looked amazing today. That stretch you did killed me. I dreamed about you last night. You were running ahead of me, teasing me. Woke up hard. I miss your skin. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. My hands trembled. I hated that it was so casual. So easy. Like this was their normal. That night, Olivia slipped into bed beside me after her shower, her damp hair spreading across the pillow like a veil. I pretended to sleep, but she leaned in and pressed a kiss to my shoulder. "I love you," she whispered, almost inaudibly. I said nothing. The next morning, she was gone again. Something broke in me that day. The kind of break that doesn't make a sound, but shifts everything. I got out of bed and didn't go to work. I didn't even tell anyone I wasn't coming in. I just sat in the kitchen for hours, staring at the same half-full coffee mug until the sun began to slant through the windows. Eventually, I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and opened her side of the closet. Her running gear was still there. A drawer full of black compression leggings, neon sports bras, headbands. On the floor, her shoes, perfectly lined up. I don't know what I was looking for, but I began searching through everything, pulling out drawers, moving hangers. That's when I found the duffel bag tucked behind a stack of yoga mats. It was packed. A change of clothes, travel-sized shampoo, a pair of folded panties tucked beneath a white tank top, her toothbrush, a small bottle of perfume. She was preparing for something. Or someone. That night, I didn't speak a word during dinner. I watched her feed the kids, laugh at Theo's story about a duck he saw at preschool, and act like everything was normal. Like we were still a family. Like I hadn't been replaced in slow, deliberate increments. After the kids went to bed, she poured herself a glass of wine and joined me in the living room. I kept my eyes on the television, the volume low, the tension thick. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "A lie. Work's been hard." She ventured, a little softer. I shrugged. "Another lie." She didn't press. She never did anymore. Just sipped her wine, her foot brushing lightly against mine like a ghost of affection. That night, when she reached for me in bed, I turned away. Saturday came, and with it, her longest run of the week. She always said the weekends were for pushing limits. She left before sunrise. I watched her go from the front window, coffee in hand, heart pounding. Something inside me said, today is different. And it was. I waited 30 minutes, then followed. I took the trail behind the high school, the one she said was too rugged for her usual path. But I knew where they met. Past the park, near the river bend where the trees grew thick and the noise of the world couldn't reach. I walked. Slowly, carefully. Their voices came first, muffled, but unmistakable. Then the soft, rhythmic sound of movement. I stopped before I reached the clearing, leaning against a tree, my breath shallow. Her laugh. His whisper. The telltale rustle of grass. I didn't need to see it. I already knew. And yet, I stepped forward. Just enough to see through the leaves. There they were, tangled, raw, lost in a moment that didn't belong to me. I turned before they saw me. My feet moved on their own, carrying me away from the betrayal I'd just confirmed. The world blurred at the edges. Everything was too bright, too sharp, too loud. By the time I reached home, the sky had turned a cruel shade of blue. I sat in the driveway for nearly an hour before walking inside. My kids were still asleep. The silence wrapped around me like a shroud. In the kitchen, I picked up her journal. She kept one too. I'd seen her writing in it after her runs, always claiming she was tracking progress. I opened it. The first page read, "Running taught me how to breathe again. Grant reminded me what it feels like to be seen." I closed it gently. My hands shook. Later, when she came home, flushed and glowing, she smiled at me like nothing had changed. "How was your run?" I asked, voice hollow. She paused, surprised. "Good. Really good." I nodded, met her eyes, and whispered. Mine was too. Her smile faltered. By the time she asked if I wanted to go for a run with her again, it was already too late. It was a Wednesday, clear skies, crisp morning air, the kind that makes the earth feel new. Olivia stood at the foot of the bed, her running shoes in hand, hesitating. "You haven't come with me in a while," she said. "Would you want to?" I looked at her. Really looked. Her face was flushed with hope, but her eyes carried a weight she didn't seem ready to name. There was something tentative in her tone, like she was holding out an olive branch she wasn't sure I'd take. "I have a meeting," I lied. She nodded, disappointed but unsurprised. And then she left. The thing is, I didn't have a meeting. I sat in that same spot after she left, staring at the empty space on her side of the bed. And for a moment, I thought about the version of me who would have said yes. Who would have tied his shoes, kissed her forehead, and tried to run fast enough to catch her again, not in miles, but in meaning. But that man had been shedding pieces of himself for weeks now, and there wasn't much of him left. She was different lately, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. I could see it in her movements. She floated in and out of rooms like she didn't want to be noticed, like guilt had started whispering in her ear. But she still went every morning, still returned flushed and glowing. Still told the kids stories about squirrels darting across trails and how the morning fog wrapped around them like a blanket. The stories were hers. The miles were theirs. I became a shadow in my own home, present but not felt. At dinner, I listened more than I spoke. When she asked how work was, I gave vague answers. When the kids talked about their day, I clung to those details like lifelines. I stopped checking her phone. I stopped reading her journal. I didn't need to. Whatever I'd been afraid of before had already taken root and bloomed. And then came the photo. It arrived via an unknown number, attached to a message that simply read, "You should know." The image was taken from a distance, slightly blurred, but there was no mistaking the two figures. Olivia and Grant, standing close, too close, beneath a canopy of trees, her hand cradling his jaw, his fingers resting at the hem of her shirt. Her face tilted up, lips parted in a moment of almost kiss. My stomach turned to stone. There's a quiet kind of violence in moments like that. It doesn't shout or scream. It just sinks. A weight you didn't know your body could carry suddenly takes residence inside your ribs. I didn't reply to the number. I didn't confront her. Instead, I printed the photo. Black and white. Matte finish. I slipped it into a book she kept on her nightstand. Some half-read memoir about spiritual clarity and the power of nature. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next morning, I watched her discover it. I was pretending to read, my back propped against the headboard. She opened the book, found the photo, and froze. There was no gasp, no tears, just silence. Long, heavy. When she finally looked at me, her mouth opened slightly, like she might speak. But nothing came out. I held her gaze, my eyes dull. How long? A beat passed. Since March, she whispered. That was almost 5 months ago. My chest rose and fell slowly. Do you love him? Another beat. I don't know. That answer hit harder than if she'd said yes. She reached for my hand, and I flinched before she could touch me. I didn't plan for it to happen, she said softly. At first it felt like a spark. Something I hadn't felt in years. And then it became more. More. That word echoed through my head like a bell tolling. I was right here, I murmured. She closed her eyes, pain etched across her face. I know. I was right here, I said again, louder this time. Waking up next to you. Making pancakes for our kids. Loving you the best way I knew how. And you ran away. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. The silence that followed was suffocating. After that night, things unraveled quickly. She moved into the guest room without needing to be asked. We didn't tell the kids anything, but they felt it. Kids always feel it. Theo stopped asking why Mommy and Daddy didn't kiss goodbye in the mornings. Lily began sleeping with her bedroom door cracked, like she was waiting for something to sneak in. Grant stopped coming around, at least visibly. She said she told him she needed space, but I didn't ask for proof. I didn't care anymore. Then came the night she asked if we could talk. She stood in the doorway of my office, clutching a mug like a shield. I think we need to decide what we're doing. The kids, they deserve to know what's happening. I nodded, because she was right. She sat down across from me. Her eyes were red. I've scheduled an appointment with a therapist. I blinked. For yourself? For us. If you're willing. That caught me off guard. Why now? Her lips trembled. Because I miss you. Because I want to understand why I let this happen. Because I don't know if we can fix it, but I can't live with myself if I don't try. I stared at her. This woman, the same one who had once curled against my chest on rainy mornings, who had wept when our son was born, who now sat across from me with a crack in her voice, was still familiar. But changed. Broken in a way I couldn't fix. I don't know, I said quietly. I don't know if I can do that. She nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. I don't want us to hate each other. I looked at her, really looked, and said, I don't hate you, Olivia. I hate what you did. But I don't hate you. She cried then. Not sobs, not hysterics. Just quiet, exhausted tears that seemed to say, I know. I hate it too. The next morning, she ran alone again. But this time, I watched her from the driveway. Her silhouette, smaller now somehow, disappeared down the familiar path that once belonged to both of us. And I stayed behind, barefoot on the concrete, wondering if there was a way back, or if that trail had diverged forever. I wish I could tell you that there was a clear turning point. That one morning we woke up and the weight between us had lifted, like mist retreating from a field after sunrise. But healing doesn't work like that. It's slow, messy, uneven. The day I agreed to therapy, Olivia cried. Not dramatically. She just nodded and whispered, thank you. like it was a lifeline she didn't think I'd grab. I didn't do it for her. Not at first. I did it for myself. I needed answers. Needed to know why the woman I shared a life with had turned a piece of her heart towards someone else. Our session started off awkward. The therapist's office smelled like lavender and old carpet, and the cushions on the couch were too soft. We sat at opposite ends, never touching, eyes focused anywhere but each other. But over time, the stories began to unfold. I didn't set out to betray him, Olivia said in one of our early sessions, her voice trembling. It wasn't even about sex at first. It was the way he looked at me, like I mattered. I wanted to shout that I looked at her that way, too. That for years, I had seen her even when she didn't see herself. But I didn't. I just listened. I learned things I didn't want to learn. That she'd been lonely. That she felt taken for granted. That the routine of our lives, though safe, had made her feel invisible. And I admitted things I hadn't been brave enough to before. That I had grown complacent. That I assumed her love was constant, immovable. That I didn't check in often enough. Not really. Not deeply. Somewhere in the unraveling, we found threads worth saving. There were days I couldn't stand the sight of her. Days when I imagined Grant's hands on her and had to walk out of the room just to breathe. And there were nights when she cried herself to sleep just inches from me, guilt and sorrow pouring from her in quiet sobs. But we kept showing up. The kids knew something was different. They asked questions we answered with half-truths and promises to talk more when they were older. We kept family dinners, kept routines, held on to what we could. And then came the morning I found her running shoes at the door, untouched. I was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when she walked in barefoot, hair still messy from sleep. You didn't go? I asked, surprised. She shook her head. I didn't want to. I raised an eyebrow. You feeling okay? She stepped closer. I don't want to run from anything anymore. It was the first time she'd touched me in weeks, her hand on my chest, tentative, waiting. I didn't move away. We didn't fall into each other. Not that morning. But something shifted. We started walking together instead of running. At first, just around the block. Then longer routes. Without the pressure of pace or sweat or burned calories, we talked more. About the kids. About the therapist. About us. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't easy. But it was real. One Saturday, months after everything had come crashing down, she sat beside me on the back porch, sipping tea while the kids played with sidewalk chalk. I haven't spoken to him in a long time, she said, eyes fixed on the horizon. I thought about it. So many times. But I didn't. I couldn't. I nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. She looked at me then. You don't have to forgive me. I just want to be honest. Forgiveness is a funny thing. People treat it like a switch you flip, a single moment that changes everything. But for me, it came in pieces. In shared meals. In silent walks. In watching her fight. Really fight. To rebuild trust, even when she didn't know if I'd ever meet her halfway. And one morning, I did. We stood in the park, the one where I'd once seen her with him, and she reached for my hand without asking. I let her take it. I miss this, she said. Me too. I replied, and for the first time in nearly a year, I meant it. We'll never go back to what we were. Too much happened. But we're building something new now, slower, more deliberate. I still carry the scar of betrayal. Some days it pulses. Some nights it wakes me. But I also carry the memory of her trying. Of us trying. Grant became a ghost. Just another man who passed through a life not his to keep. And Olivia? She's here. Still flawed. Still healing. So am I. But we're here. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before the kids wake, we still walk together. Side by side. Step by step. The pace is slower now. But the direction is finally ours.